Good morning and welcome. My name is Natalie Rue and I am the Professional Certification Marketing Manager here at BCS. Today we'll be talking about software and hardware asset management. Today I'm sat with Robbie Richmond, Director of EasySAM Ltd and subject matter expert who will be presenting this session with me. He'll go through an introduction to software and hardware asset management, a market overview including the size and scope of the training opportunity, the target market for this certificate, and details of the actual certificate. Just a bit of housekeeping to start with. This webinar will be recorded and available on the BCS website from next week. Please let me know if at any point you can't hear us by sending us a message in the text box on your screen. The webinar will last around 30 minutes. So that you're all aware, all attendees are on mute for the duration of the webinar, but if you have any questions as we go along, please use the question box at the bottom of your screen and we'll get to those questions at the end. So without further ado, let me pass you over to Robbie, who will take you over his slides.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming along to the this sort of overview to the BCS Software and Hardware Asset Management certification course and syllabus. So just want to start off by, as Natalie's already said, just some of the topics that we'll go through, an introduction to software and hardware asset management, a little bit about the people that have been involved in the creation and the content for this syllabus, a little overview on the software and hardware asset management market. It's an area that's growing rapidly, and just want to make sure that everybody understands and is aware of why this training is relevant and why it's appropriate as either an expansion to an existing offering that you've got or as a new offering. And those people and organizations that potentially will be most interested in developing or improving their software and hardware asset management capability. So just a quick introduction. Some of you may be familiar with software asset management or hardware asset management as topics. For most organizations, a significant amount of money is spent on their IT assets, and that's typically composed of a couple of different sections, primarily hardware. So this comprises of physical hardware that you purchase, so servers, printers, networking equipment, etc., data centers. We know from experience that the amount of money that organizations are spending on their hardware environments is not only significant but also growing. The second component is the software side. Software is, in some organizations, can account for anything up to about 20–25% of their IT budget. We find organizations are increasingly reliant on the use of software. They are looking at different types of implementations for their software, different ways of licensing their software to give them competitive advantage, to ensure that they remain compliant, etc. And so these two areas, hardware and software, comprise your IT assets. And like any other asset, it's important that organizations treat those assets financially. They're looked after, they're monitored, they're reported on and managed, and that's no different for hardware and software. So from a hardware perspective, we're looking at things like how we procure them, how we manage them when they're in situ, how we record financial information about those assets, how we control movement, retirement, etc. And software, the same principles apply, looking at procuring software in the most efficient way possible, making sure that the software that we procure is being used for the purposes that it was procured for, making sure that we manage things like upgrades when new joiners join our organization, when people leave the organization, when hardware assets are retired, how do we manage the software that goes with that? So really, these two areas are, fairly significant in terms of not only the amount of money that organizations spend on them, but potentially in terms of the type of savings that can be garnered by managing these assets more effectively. And so IT asset management is an umbrella term that covers your use of software and managing your software, and your use of hardware and managing the hardware as well. So you'll see pictures of 4 different people on the screen. These are the people that have been involved in the development of this certification. The slightly unfortunate looking guy on the left is myself, so you can now put a face to the name. Vaughan has considerable experience in software asset management, a bit like myself, been around for quite a long time. Vaughan was one of the people who developed the Microsoft license statement, or what was originally called the Claret, on behalf of Microsoft. Jeevan is an IT asset management specialist, so a broader scope than maybe just the software asset management side that maybe myself and Vaughan have kind of more focused on historically. He currently works within HMRC, who are obviously an organization that we want to make sure that they're managing their IT assets effectively, because at the end of the day we're paying for them, so we want to make sure that they're doing that properly. And then May, who works with me at EasySAM, is one of our senior SAM consultants. You've got a very, very strong team with a significant history of not just kind of theoretical experience around SAM and hardware asset management, but also practical experience, both from a vendor point of view. Vaughan and I have both worked for organizations who develop and create asset management tools, through to working for organizations who deliver these services, myself at EasySAM, Vaughan at Astria, and also the work that Vaughan's done for Microsoft historically, and also from an end user perspective with Jeevan, having a customer focused view as to the drivers and the benefits behind hardware and software asset management. And I think it's a strong team that have looked at the type of content that's really relevant and appropriate to help delegates who are enrolled in this course, not only to help expand their understanding of software and hardware asset management, but also to be able to deliver real benefit to those organizations that are ultimately probably paid for them to come on the course. So we see this as being not only a strong team, but also one that can create a very, very strong offering in terms of the content, in terms of the value of the certification as well, and at the end of the day, the benefit that the organizations will receive in having people signed up to this sort of certification. I'm the only one here at the moment in terms of the webinar, so if anyone does have any questions, feel free to pop them through to me. If there are any that are more appropriate, maybe for and one of the other members to respond to, we can certainly come back with that. But for now, any questions that you've got, please feel free to direct them to myself. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the IT asset management market, and I think a really important point here is to demonstrate that this is a market that's growing really, really quickly. If I go back, I don't know, maybe 9 or 10 years ago, software asset management was really only starting to develop some traction. Prior to that, it was very much around compliance and responding to vendor audits. The idea of managing these big investments that we made in software and to an extent hardware, the idea of managing those proactively really only started to really kind of gather strength in the last sort of decade, and it resulted in vendor organizations, people like Microsoft, Adobe, Oracle, SAP, IBM, developing their own SAM kind of teams in-house to try and help organizations to manage their software more effectively. If we look at the software asset management market in terms of purely just tool sales, you're looking at something that's growing at anywhere between 5 and sort of 15% per year, and the forecast is for that to continue over the next 5 years, and with the resultant increase in the amount of investment people are making in tools, that also then corresponds into the investment they would make in people. We know from the experience of being involved in this market for such a long time that an investment in a tool is all well and good, but unless you've got people who can implement and interpret the data coming out of that tool and make kind of strong decisions, the investment in the tool itself is going to be fairly impacted by not having the right skills and the right resources in place. The training course itself actually talks about that. We talk about the importance of roles and responsibilities, and making sure that the right roles and responsibilities are covered in terms of SAM and in terms of hardware asset management as well. We also know that there's a shortage of skills in this area at the moment. If you look at job boards, or you look at, I'm obviously quite close to a lot of the recruitment organizations who specialize in this area. Most of the roles that these guys are advertising for, there's a 4 to 6 month gap in terms of filling the roles, because there just isn't the right quantity of applicable skills out there. If you see the sort of middle box on the right, a SAM analyst in the UK can earn anywhere between 32 and 81,000 per annum, and IT asset management anywhere between 36 and 102,000 per annum. So that's a really good indicator of the level of demand. It also shows that individuals who want to expand their capability and maybe move up the pay scale a little bit, this type of certification would certainly be relevant for them. So if you've got somebody who's involved in, say, procurement, or involved in finance, or involved in some form of software licensing, and they want to expand not only their skill set but also their earning potential, then this course would certainly be appropriate for those people as well. Just taking SAM as an example, if you implement effective software asset management within an organization, figures by industry bodies like Gartner kind of reflect the fact that you can save up to 30% of your software budget in the first year, and 30% of most organizations' software budget is going to be a big number. And so the idea of paying a team of analysts 30 to 80,000 per annum, when you could be talking about several £1 million return, is actually quite palatable for a lot of organizations as well. So it's resulted in this really strong demand for software asset management and IT asset management skills. And again, if you look on the right hand side, the sort of grey box at the bottom, the IT asset management market, so covering hardware, not just software, is also growing at 11.4% per year, expected to grow at that rate over the next 5 years. So these are not skills that are just sort of leveling out, or skills that are the demand is reducing. And with an increase in a demand for skills, for sure there'll be an increase in a demand for applicable and relevant certification. And that's why this specific course was developed, to make sure that organizations had access to resources, or had access to a forum where the individuals that they have could get the relevant and appropriate skills they need to be able to develop strong SAM and IT asset management capability in-house. So just looking at the SAM and IT asset management market over the next sort of couple of years, what we saw maybe 2 years ago was a really strong demand from organizations for SAM and licensing skills. These are two areas that are increasingly complicated. Vendors are bringing out new licensing rules on a regular basis, and if you're entering the SAM or licensing space now, you don't just need to understand the rules that are relevant now, you also need to understand the rules that were relevant a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, because some of your software will still be reliant on those, that entitlement, those usage rights, etc. We also started to see over the last few years really strong focus from senior management on the SAM and licensing capability within their organizations, primarily driven by the fact that senior management were the ones who would be responsible if there was a vendor audit, and which resulted in maybe a significant licensing shortfall. And so a lot of these senior management, it was their necks that were on the line in terms of there being any licensing shortfall. So what we then look at is this kind of move from just about kind of compliance driven emphasis onto things like, well, how do I manage my cloud and my hybrid, bring my own device, software as a service, those types of environments where potentially spend can get a little bit out of control, and how do I do that in an environment where there's actually a limited amount of SAM resource and SAM capability out there, and that's kind of where we're at now. So organizations are looking for people with these really strong skills around, optimization and around, making sure that they have visibility of all of their software usage and where it is, etc. And as we push forward, what we're going to see over the next couple of years is an increased focus on efficiency and agility. We're seeing this in other areas of IT. Agility is a massive focus for most IT organizations, and for sure that's going to tie into how do we utilize our software, how do we make sure that the software agreements that we've got, the type of licenses that we've got, allow us to deliver an agile environment. They allow us to pay for what we're using and not have any wastage or not have any overspend. And as that focus increases, the resource pool of people to be able to deliver that will need to be expanded. And so, we're very much trying to paint a picture here that actually over the next few years, the demand for SAM and ITAM certification and skilled resources is only going in one direction, and that's that it's going to increase. And those organizations who want to bring somebody in, they'll want to bring in somebody who has a recognizable certification and from a credible organization like the BCS, one that's aligned with a recognized standard like ITIL or ISO. And again, that's very much what this course was kind of developed to deliver, to make sure that organizations had access to a pool of trained people that could have these sort of demonstrable skills. But also, if they didn't have that, if the organizations had resources in-house that didn't have sufficient training or sufficient experience, that they could also have a path where those individuals could, make sure that they brought their training up to scratch, up to current standards, current understandings, and best practice. And that's very much the focus of the development of this certification. So what we see in the SAM and ITAM space, some of you will be very familiar with this, is really a focus on a couple of key areas, a couple of key drivers to make sure that the returns and the investment that's required for SAM and IT asset management kind of make sense. So the first and the most obvious one is cost savings. Most organizations are under increasing pressure, and certainly most IT organizations are under increasing pressure to drive down what they're spending their money on. And budgets are tightening. We obviously have a lot of uncertainty with things like Brexit looming. We have a lot of uncertainty with some of the stuff that's happening in the US with trade barriers, etc. So, for a lot of organizations, it's a good time for them to look at tightening their belts a little bit. And by managing your software and hardware more effectively, we can already demonstrate that we're able to deliver significant cost savings in those areas. And that will be the primary driver for the vast majority of organizations, is around the reduction of the money they spend on software. As you can see on here, 40% of organizations are concerned about the risk of an audit. Most organizations, particularly organizations with 1,000 employees plus, they are going to be audited annually, in some cases by more than one vendor. And when that happens, that creates a huge amount of uncertainty. It creates a significant amount of additional workload for them. But also there's the concern that they might have an issue with their licensing, and that could result in a significant and an unbudgeted cost. And at the end of the day, that's going to reflect on senior management for allowing them to get into that situation. So being able to ensure that in the event of a vendor audit, you are able to respond quickly, you are able to respond accurately, and you are able to respond with a definitive kind of compliance position is going to make your life a lot easier. It's going to help the senior management of those organizations to sleep at night. And at the end of the day, that's what makes the investment in software asset management from a lot of organizations and a lot of senior management. That's what makes it worthwhile. This idea of having this reassurance that the environment is safe and protected from the risk of an external audit. 36% of organizations reference good governance, and we know that there is an emphasis on good governance in a lot of organizations, and particularly in public sector bodies. I mentioned Jivan working earlier for HMRC, but we're looking at local government, we're looking at local councils, we're looking at education, we're looking at hospitals, police forces, etc. We want to make sure that they're managing those environments in a way that is sustainable and in a way that demonstrates that they are providing good governance, and being able to show that your IT estate is well managed, is controlled, is documented, and that it's effectively optimized. All of those things are going to provide you with a lot of reassurance that you are getting the most out of those assets. So corporate governance is a very important principle. A lot of organizations will sign up to particular corporate governance standards, and they'll need to be able to demonstrate that they're conformance with those standards, and if they don't, then that could have an impact on how they're viewed publicly. It might have an impact on things like funding, etc. 17% of organizations want to focus on their return on investment. When we go out and we make an investment in a piece of software, one of the things that we will look at is what we expect our return on investment to be, but you cannot manage what you cannot see. And so making sure that you have effective software and hardware asset management will make sure that you are able to measure the benefits and the return on investment on what you're actually spending that money on. A lot of times we might put a business case together for a piece of software that says we expect this return on investment, but if we don't measure and demonstrate that, we never actually know if that business case was viable, if it delivered the return on investment that we suggested it would. By having visibility of your hardware and software, it will make sure that you are able to demonstrate that. And again, that's an important point and an important area that is covered under this training. We will help organizations, help the individual delegates understand how they measure return on investment and how they can demonstrate to the organizations they work for a return on investment on software. Finally, and I say finally in terms of the top 5 drivers, there are a significant number of other drivers that sit behind this, but in terms of what really drives organizations for an investment in IT asset management, it's purely about having better visibility of what you've got and where it is and how it's being used, and that might be driven by warranty renewals, lease management. It might be driven by things like maintenance contracts, etc. But just understanding, what have I got, where is it, how is it being used, and making sure that it is being used in the way that it was supposed to and for the purpose that it was supposed to. That the fancy new server that you've just bought isn't actually being used as a gaming server for the IT department. That the printer that you've spent a lot of money on with all the extra options isn't being used by one person. And that actually it's hitting its what you expect in terms of its print load, etc. All of those things go into just having better visibility of kind of what's out there and how it's being used. And at the end of the day, that's really important, that we can have this baseline understanding of what our environments look like, because there's lots of other decisions that we make that are then affected by that, whether it be, and we want to move to the next version of Windows, how many devices is that? And are those devices capable of doing it? We want to move to Office 365, or we want to try and move some of our licenses from on-premise into the cloud. Well, what do my on-premises licenses look like, and how are they being used, and are they suitable to be moved, etc. All of that is dependent on having this accurate baseline and accurate visibility of what your environment looks like. So without that, you're probably gonna struggle to deliver any of the other kind of benefits that you might be looking to achieve with things like cost reduction, better return on investment, etc. So we've kind of hopefully painted a bit of a picture that this is an area that skills are in demand for, and that demand will continue, and that people with better level certification are going to be able to not only potentially command better salaries, but also be able to deliver more benefit for the organizations that they work for. And that's an important relationship. For the purpose of who this course is relevant for, well, effectively you're looking at anybody who's got an IT asset management type of responsibility. So whether that be general IT asset management, software, hardware, it impacts on things like IT procurement. We're going to cover licensing, we're going to cover how to manage how your licensing is deployed, etc. We're going to cover your IT, the roles and responsibility of senior management in terms of compliance and so on. So making sure that they have visibility of what their responsibility is, compliance officers. But it's not limited to that. We've done similar training courses for external auditors, for service management, service desk type people, etc. So, although the target audience is probably more focused on the sort of job descriptions listed on the screen, the reality is that effectively anybody who's got any responsibility or any touch points on IT assets, whether that be hardware or software, they're probably going to gain something, some real insight and some real benefit from attending and being involved in this course. It's also relevant for people who are new to software asset management or new to hardware asset management. They want to understand the basic principles. It's relevant for somebody who's got licensing responsibility. We're going to cover the kind of basics of software licensing without concentrating on any particular vendor, but just talking through different types of licenses, when one might be more relevant to another, etc. It would also be relevant for somebody who maybe has some SAM, software asset management or hardware asset management experience, but they want to make sure that they haven't got into bad habits. They want to make sure that they're conforming with kind of industry best practice. And at the end of the day, if you haven't got a kind of formal certification around it, this gives you an opportunity to have that as well. So it kind of ranges from those with very limited experience to those who maybe have been doing this job for a little while. So this course is the foundation course. We are also, once this is up and running and developed and we have a bit of feedback from people, we're then going to look at a practitioner's course. So the practitioner's course would be a follow-on to this foundation course. So it will be aimed at those who have completed successfully the foundation course and the certification. But also it will be aimed at those who maybe have a bit more experience in the software and hardware asset management space. So whether it be somebody who works for an end user organization and maybe they've been involved in SAM for a while, if you work for a SAM provider or a licensing provider and you want to expand your capability and again have the confidence that what your the sort of methodologies you're using are in line with best practice, you want to update your information, update your you're thinking with current standards, and also to have a formal kind of recognized certification at the end, then the practitioner's course would probably be relevant for you. We're going to focus more in the practitioner's course on things like processes, workflow, etc., where the foundation course will be more on the principles of software and hardware asset management. So we'll send some details of that when that's been developed. I'm sure you'll all be sent information on that, as well as an updated syllabus, and we look forward to having some of your input into that as well. But I'm quite excited about having a more advanced, a higher level kind of software and hardware asset management focus, because being honest, it's something that I think is missing at the moment. A lot of the certifications out there either work on a fairly kind of cursory level, or they try to cover everything from A to Z. And especially in a classroom environment, and I know this from experience, if you've got 10 or 12 people on a software asset management course, the range of experience that you'll have in that room will vary from somebody who's new to software asset management to somebody who's got 5 years experience, and trying to engage and keep their attention and their focus and deliver something that both ends of that spectrum get value from is very, very difficult. What we're doing here is actually having a course that's more aimed at the those with less experience, while developing a more advanced practitioner's course, which will certainly appeal to those with a bit more experience, or those who have successfully completed the foundation course. So that's all I have for you. Hopefully that gave you a good overview of software and hardware asset management in general, the relevance to both organizations and individuals who potentially might be interested in the course. Also the benefits that those organizations and those individuals can get from certification, not just in terms of their experience, but also in terms of the actual benefit those organizations will get from having trained certified staff who understand how to deliver software and hardware asset management effectively. That's a significant benefit to those organizations. So I will hand back over to Natalie. If there are any questions or anything like that, please let us know. And thank you very much for your time and attention.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Robbie. And as Robbie says, if you have any questions, we'll give you a few seconds just to put those through. But yes, thank you very much for taking us through that today, Robbie. That was great. If you are interested in the SAHAM certificate, please go to bcs.org to look at details of the certificate. I'll just give you a few more seconds just to pop any questions through if you have any. Otherwise, we'll close up, I think. A couple more seconds. Thank you, Domenico, for your reply there. It was very interesting. Thank you very much.
Good. Glad you didn't fall asleep, Domenico. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Oh, there's one there. Let me have a little look. Don't know. We've got a question here from Olesegun. Sorry if I said that wrong. You said, what are we looking at in TTT? Could you expand on that a little bit more, please? I'm not quite sure what that totally means. If you've got any more information around that, we can answer a couple of questions maybe. That was really interesting, Robbie. Thank you very much.
Good.
For
Glad you
taking us through
enjoyed it.
that. Yeah. Train the trainer. What are we looking at in Train the Trainer? So Train the Trainer information will come out in probably 4 weeks time, maybe a little bit longer. So that information will come through from our product team as soon as it's ready and will be sent through to you.
So BCS are working with the panelists here on developing some courseware content as well, which will be shared with you guys as well. So that's something else to watch out for. Again, probably similar sort of time frame.
Perfect. Okay, great. So we will close the webinar there. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening in today, and I hope you have a great day.